This letter was discovered tucked inside the lining of an old leather coat sold at a market stall in London in 1923. The coat had belonged to a man named Thomas Calloway. No one knew who he was. No one had ever looked. The candle beside me is nearly gone. I have watched it burn for the last hour, the way a man watches something precious disappear when he knows he cannot stop it. The wax drips, slow and indifferent, pooling on the stone floor like something that once had purpose and now has none. I have perhaps 2 hours of light left, perhaps less. And so I write, not because I believe anyone will read these words, but because if I do not put them somewhere outside of my chest, I think they will destroy me before morning does. My name is Thomas Calloway. I was a schoolteacher. I taught children to read in a small village called Ashford in the county of Kent in the year of our Lord 1847. I want you to know that first, before anything else, before the accusations, before the trial, before this cell and this candle and this cold stone wall that has become the last thing I will ever know. I want you to know what I was, because tomorrow when they lead me out of here, that is the version of me that will die. The innocent one, the one who loved his work and his life and asked for very little in return. I did not kill Edward Marsh. I write it plainly because I have said it so many times now that the words have lost their shape in my mouth. I have said it to the magistrate, who looked at me the way a man looks at something unpleasant on the bottom of his boot. I have said it to the constable, who wrote it down and then crossed it out. I have said it to my own solicitor, a thin, nervous man who smelled of tobacco and defeat, and who told me in a low voice 3 days before the verdict that the evidence was, in his careful words, considerable. I asked him what that meant for me. He looked out the window. That was his answer. Outside this cell I can hear London. I never thought I would say that as though it was something terrible, but tonight it is. The city moves and breathes and argues with itself the way it always does, and it does not know or care that a man sits here with ink on his fingers and a candle burning low, trying to leave some proof that he existed and that he was not what they said he was. Carts rumble over cobblestones. Someone laughs, far away. A dog barks and then goes quiet. The world is so horribly ordinary tonight, and I find that almost unbearable. I was arrested on the 14th of March. I remember the morning precisely, because it had snowed unexpectedly, a thin dusting of white across the village green, and I had stood at my cottage window with a cup of tea, thinking that it looked like something from a painting. I was thinking about my students, about a boy named William Porter, who had finally, after months of struggle, read a full sentence aloud without stumbling. I was thinking about simple things. I was not thinking about Edward Marsh or his money or the quarrel that had happened between us 6 weeks prior, a quarrel that everyone in the village had apparently memorized and was now more than happy to recite in a courtroom. Edward Marsh was a landowner, a powerful man, the kind of man whose name appears in the local paper twice a month and whose opinions are treated as weather, simply something everyone must adjust to. We had argued over the schoolhouse. He had decided, for reasons that were entirely financial, and that he dressed up in the language of progress, that the building should be sold and the children sent to a school 3 villages away, a walk of nearly 4 miles in each direction. I had opposed him publicly. I had written a letter to the county council. I had said, in front of several witnesses in the public house, that Edward Marsh cared more about his own purse than about the minds of the children in his care. 3 weeks later, Edward Marsh was found dead at the bottom of his own staircase, and I was the man they came for. The evidence, as my solicitor described it, was considerable. My boots had mud on them consistent with the path leading to Marsh's estate. A button from what was claimed to be my coat was found near the body. 2 men testified that they had seen someone matching my description near the property on the evening in question. I had motive, they said. I had anger. I had publicly humiliated a powerful man, and powerful men have a way of ensuring that those who humiliate them are remembered unfavorably. What I did not have was an alibi. I was at home that evening, alone, reading by the fire. There is no lonelier defense in the history of human justice than to say you were at home, alone, doing something peaceful, while somewhere not far away a man was dying. No witness, no proof, just the truth, sitting quietly in the corner of the room while everyone else made so much noise. The jury took 40 minutes. I have tried not to hate them. I sit here tonight and I try, genuinely and with whatever grace I have left, not to hate those 12 men who sat in their wooden chairs and looked at me and decided that the evidence was sufficient, that I was the kind of man capable of climbing a hill in the dark and ending another man's life, and then walking home and sleeping soundly. I try not to hate them because hate is heavy, and I do not have the strength for it tonight. But I will confess that I do not entirely succeed. What I feel more than hate is a profound and wordless grief. Not for what is coming tomorrow morning, though that sits in me like a stone, but for the life that already ended, for the classroom I will never return to, for the children who were told, in whatever careful language adults use for terrible things, that their teacher was taken away. For William Porter, who was just beginning to read. I wonder if anyone will finish teaching him. The candle has burned lower now. I can see the shadow it throws against the wall, long and trembling, like something trying to run, but unable to lift its feet. I have been staring at that shadow for longer than I should. There is something almost companionable about it, the way it moves when I move, the way it leans when I lean. It is the only thing in this cell that responds to me. The walls do not. The door does not. The guard who walks past every half hour does not even turn his head. I have been in this cell for 4 months. I want you to understand what 4 months in a place like this does to a man who has done nothing wrong. It does not harden you the way people imagine. It does not make you cold or indifferent or resigned. What it does, slowly and with terrible patience, is remove things from you, things you did not know you could lose. The first thing I lost was the sound of my own voice, as I remembered it. I used to speak to 30 children every day. My voice was a working thing, warm and purposeful, rising and falling with stories, with questions, with the particular music of teaching. In here, I have had no one to speak to, and when I do speak, to the guard, to the chaplain who visited twice and then stopped coming, I hear something thin and uncertain come out of my mouth, and I do not recognize it. The second thing I lost was the ability to imagine the future. A man runs on the fuel of his own future. He wakes in the morning, and without even knowing he is doing it, he pictures what tomorrow will look like, and next month, and the year after. It is as natural as breathing. We do not notice it until it is gone. And then one day you wake on a thin mattress in a stone cell, and you reach for that picture of the future, and there is nothing there, just a grey blankness, like a canvas that has been painted over. And that is the moment, I think, when a man truly understands what it means to be condemned. I lost sleep next, then appetite. Then, for a frightening period of about 3 weeks in November, I lost hope entirely. Hope came back, in small pieces. A letter from my sister Eleanor, a morning when the light came through the high window at an angle that reminded me of the schoolroom in winter. A spider that built a web in the corner of my cell over the course of 4 days, working with such quiet determination that I found myself cheering for it in the privacy of my own thoughts. These are the things that kept me from the very darkest place, small, absurd, beautiful things. But tonight there are no more pieces of hope to collect. Tonight is what it is. I want to write about Eleanor. She is 4 years younger than me and has always been, in every way that matters, stronger. Where I am measured and careful, Eleanor is immediate. She feels everything at once, and she is not ashamed of it. When we were children, she once argued with our father for 2 full hours over the treatment of a stray cat. She was 9 years old. She did not win the argument exactly, but the cat stayed. That is Eleanor. She does not always win, but she changes the outcome. She came to the trial every day. I would look for her face in the gallery as they brought me in, and she was always there, in the same blue coat, with the same expression, which was not grief exactly, but something more like fury held very carefully in check, the way you hold a lamp in the wind. She believed me. She has never stopped believing me. I know this not because she said it, which she did, often and loudly to anyone who would listen, but because of the way she looked at me across that courtroom. There is a particular look that a person gives you when they know the truth of you, when they have known you since before you had any pretense or performance, and they are simply seeing you clearly. Eleanor looked at me that way every single day. After the verdict, she tried to speak to my solicitor. I could see her across the room, her hands moving, her voice too low for me to hear. He was shaking his head. She came to me instead, and they only gave us a moment, the guard standing close enough to hear every word, and she took both my hands in hers, and she said, "Thomas, I will not stop. I will not stop until they know." I told her to take care of herself. She told me that was not the point. That was 6 days ago, the last time I saw her face. I have been thinking tonight about my mother, who died when I was 17. She was a quiet woman, not silent, but quiet in the way that certain people are, as though they have decided that the world contains so much noise already that they will not add to it unnecessarily. She spoke when she had something worth saying, and when she did speak, you listened, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it through all the silence that came before. I think about her tonight, and I wonder what she would say if she were here. Not about the trial, not about the injustice of it. I think she would sit beside me on this terrible mattress, and she would take my hand the way Eleanor took my hand, and she would say something very simple, something that would be enough. I cannot think of what it would be, but I feel the shape of it. I taught my students about the ancient Romans. I remember telling them once about the Roman concept of dignitas. It was not quite dignity in the modern sense. It was more than that. It was the sum of a man's worth, his reputation, his honor, all of it accumulated over a lifetime of choices, visible to the world and to himself. I told my students that the Romans believed this was the most important thing a man possessed, more important than money or land or even safety. I have been robbed of mine, not by Edward Marsh, not by whoever pushed him down that staircase in the cold of February, but by a courtroom and a jury and a system that looked at a man with mud on his boots and a missing button and a public argument on record and decided that was sufficient. That was enough to end a life. That was enough to take a man's dignitas and lay it in the dirt and call the matter settled. I am not settled. I want whoever reads this, if anyone ever does, to know that. I am not at peace with this. I am not resigned. I am angry, quietly and completely, in the way I imagine my mother would have been angry, without noise but without end. I sit here in this cell, and I am furious at the waste of it, at the children I will not teach, at the books I will not read, at the mornings I will not see, at William Porter, who needed more time. The candle is very low now. I can feel the cold coming up through the floor and into my bones, the particular cold of old stone that never truly warms, regardless of the season. I have learned the geography of this cold over 4 months. It starts at the feet and moves upward, slowly, and by the early hours of the morning it has reached the chest, and that is when sleep becomes impossible, and thought becomes enormous, and the night stretches out in front of you like a corridor with no end. Tonight, I do not mind the cold so much. Tonight, I have this paper, and this ink, and this last inch of candle, and I have things left to say. I have been thinking about the morning they arrested me. Not the moment itself, not the knock at the door, or the constable's face, or the snow on the green that looked like a painting. I have thought about those things enough. They have worn grooves in my mind from the repetition. What I have been thinking about tonight, in these last hours, is what came just before. The 10 minutes before the knock, the last 10 minutes of my ordinary life, which I did not know were the last, and which I therefore did not treat with the reverence they deserved. I was standing at the window with my tea, that is all. I was standing at the window with my tea, watching the snow, thinking about William Porter and his sentence, and somewhere in the village, Edward Marsh was already dead, and the constable was already pulling on his coat, and the machinery of my destruction was already in motion, and I knew none of it. I was just a man at a window with a warm cup in his hand and a quiet mind, and a whole life arranged in front of him like furniture in a room he had lived in so long he had stopped noticing it. I would give everything I have left, which is very little, to stand at that window again. Not to change anything. I have thought about this carefully, and I mean it precisely. I would not go back to warn myself, or to run, or to find some alibi that would save me. I would go back simply to stand there one more time, with full knowledge of what it was. To feel the warmth of the cup. To see the snow with eyes that understood they were seeing something irreplaceable. To let the ordinary morning be the extraordinary thing it actually was, which I was too ordinary myself to recognize. We do not know we are happy until we are not. I think that is the cruelest thing about being human. The chaplain came to see me this evening. I had not expected him. He is a young man, younger than me, with a face that has not yet learned to conceal what it feels. And when he came through the door and saw me sitting here with my paper and my candle, he looked at me with an expression I cannot fully describe. It was not pity exactly. It was something more complicated, something that acknowledged that he was standing on one side of an uncrossable distance and that he knew it and was sorry for it. He asked if I wanted to pray. I told him I did not know what I wanted. He sat with me anyway. For almost an hour he sat on the floor beside the door, because there is only one place to sit in this cell and I was using it, and he did not speak, and I did not speak, and the candle burned between us, and it was, strangely, the most human I have felt in 4 months. Not the prayers, which came eventually, and which I participated in out of something between habit and desperation, but the silence before them, the simple willingness of another person to be present in a room where presence cost something. Before he left, he pressed a small book into my hands. It was a collection of psalms, very old, the cover worn soft as cloth. He said it had belonged to his grandfather. He said I should keep it. I told him I did not think I would have much use for it by morning. He said that was exactly why I should have it tonight. I have it beside me now. I want to speak about justice, not the justice of courts and magistrates which I have experienced fully, and which I think I have described adequately. I mean something larger, something that I have been wrestling with in this cell for 4 months, and that I have not been able to resolve, and that I suspect I will carry out of this place tomorrow morning, still unresolved. I was a man who believed in order, in the rightness of things. I taught my students about laws and systems, and the structures that human beings build to protect each other from chaos. I believed, genuinely and without irony, that those structures were good, that they worked, that the distance between guilt and innocence was a distance that institutions could reliably measure. I do not know what I believe now. I know that 12 men sat in a room and made a decision, and that decision was wrong. I know that the distance between guilt and innocence turned out to be a great deal narrower than I had supposed. I know that a missing button and muddy boots and one angry sentence spoken in a public house were sufficient to end a life. And I do not know what to do with that knowledge, except to write it down and hope that someone, someday, finds it useful. Perhaps things will be different one day. Perhaps there will come a time when the machinery of justice is built with more care for the possibility of error. Perhaps some future court will understand that certainty is a very high standard, and that the consequences of falling short of it are irreversible, and therefore the whole enterprise demands a level of caution that mine did not receive. I hope so. I hope so, not for my sake, because my sake is no longer the point, but for the sake of every man who will come after me and stand in a dock and tell the truth, and find that truth is not, by itself, enough. Eleanor. I have been saving her name for this part of the letter because I did not trust myself to write it earlier. I knew that once I began writing about her, I would not be able to stop, and I had other things I needed to say first, while I still had the clarity for them. But the candle is nearly gone now, and my hand is cramping from the cold, and I am running out of time in every possible sense, and so I will say what I need to say. She must stop. I know she will not. I know my sister, and I know that somewhere in this city tonight she is awake, as I am awake, and she is writing letters or making plans, or simply sitting with her fury held carefully like a lamp in the wind. And she will not stop tomorrow, and she will not stop next month, and she may not stop for years. I know this because she is Eleanor, and stopping is not in her nature, and because she loves me in that complete and uncomplicated way that only the people who knew you as a child can love you. But I need to say it anyway. I need to say, Eleanor, please. Please find a way to live around this. Please do not let what they have done to me become the thing that defines you. You are so much more than a sister to a dead man. You are so much more than grief. You argued for 2 hours over a cat when you were 9 years old. You changed the outcome. You have always changed the outcome. Go and change some other outcome. Go and live in the world that I am leaving and carry something forward that is worth carrying. I am not afraid. I want to say that clearly, and I want it to be true, and I think, mostly, it is. There is a trembling in my hands tonight, but I believe that is the cold and not the fear. I have made my peace with tomorrow in the only way available to me, which is to accept that I cannot change it, and to spend the hours I have left doing something purposeful instead of something desperate. I am writing. That is purposeful. That is the most Thomas Calloway thing I can do with a last night, and I think he would be pleased, the man at the window with his tea, to know that this is how his last hours were spent. I did not kill Edward Marsh. I say it one final time, not because I think it will help me now. I say it because I want it written down in ink on paper in my own hand, and I want whoever finds this letter to hold it and to feel the weight of those words, and to understand that they were written by a man who had nothing left to gain from lying. A man with a burned candle and a cold floor, and a psalm book he was given by a young chaplain who sat in silence when silence was the only honest thing. A man who taught children to read. A man who stood at a window one ordinary morning and watched the snow and thought about a boy named William Porter who had finally, after months of trying, read a whole sentence without stopping. I hope someone finishes teaching him. I hope Eleanor finds her way. I hope whoever pushed Edward Marsh down those stairs lives a very long life, long enough to understand what they have taken from this world, long enough to feel the full weight of it settling on them in the quiet hours when there is nothing left to do but face what you have done. The candle is gone. I am writing now by the light that comes through the small window above me, a thin grey light that I think is the very beginning of morning, and I do not know how much longer I can see these words, and I find I do not have many left. I was a schoolteacher. I was innocent. I stood at a window once and watched the snow and held a warm cup and had a whole life in front of me, and I did not know enough to be grateful, and if I have one regret above all others, it is simply that. If you have found this letter, whoever you are, in whatever year you are reading it, then some part of me has made it out of this cell after all, and perhaps that will have to be enough.